All right, it's time to watch and respond to the Pikmon video about the great Mordin Solus and why he is the best. So let's check it out.
Massive spoilers for a great character and some of the best moments in the series. I really recommend playing the Mass Effect trilogy before watching this video because I'm not marking any spoilers from here on out.
I am the very model of a scientist Solarian. I've studied species Turian, Asari, and Batarian. I'm quite good at genetics as a subset of biology because I am an expert which I know as a tautology. My xenoscience studies range from urban to agrarian. I am the very model of a scientist Solarian.
Now, two things. First of all, I don't know which options I picked incorrectly, but I never listened to the song during the two playthroughs that I can remember of this game. I found out by sheer accident by watching somebody else's video about it, and even when I did, the reference also completely flew over my head because, well, I never watched the play. I seriously did not. So yeah, you can take that for what it will. Oh, by the way, please hit the like button and subscribe and pass my video around and help my channel grow. But yeah, I did not get the reference, and I didn't even get the song in the first place. So yeah, this was a huge shock to yours truly.
While that is definitely definitive proof of his brilliance, there is even more to Mordin that really makes him the best in my opinion.
Oh, and one more thing, it's a pity. It makes it all the more a pity that they switched out voice actors.
And it is not an easy choice to say which squad mate is the best. Mordin is up against a massive slew of deep, lovable, charming characters and at the disadvantage of only being a squad mate in one game, while also not having a romance. Yet I still think he comes out on top. What makes him so good can be boiled down into three parts.
And that's another thing I both liked and disliked about the third game, the way it introduced an affair he had with Arya to Loke somehow. How would that even work? I mean, his species, do not do it the way, well, humans and Asarian, Batarians, and Turians would do it. So, yeah.
Mordin's presence, Mordin's inner conflict, and Mordin's outcomes. No dilly-dallying, we are diving right into the meat here. Part 1. Mordin's presence. Mordin has an insanely strong presence in Mass Effect 2. One of the biggest issues with the game is that many of the squad mates just kind of sit around in their rooms, never acknowledging each other or what you've been doing, and they only have a few conversations with Shepard before always defaulting to a generic, nah, I don't want to chat line. Mordin avoids most of these issues, however. He is in the second most important room on the ship behind the CIC, the Tech Lab. You spend a lot of time in this room because it's where you make use of one of the central aspects of Mass Effect 2.
And that's thank you for the reminder of one of the biggest things I hated about the third game. Well, I hated lots of things about it, but the way they took away my tech lab and moved the armory downstairs. I mean, the CIC floor level, only half of it gets used. The rest is just blank, empty space. And they have the nerve to pretend that Cerberus was wasting space, and therefore the Alliance was making it better. How is it making it better by making half of the CIC inaccessible? Such BS.
Upgrades. You're constantly heading into here to upgrade your gear. This room can't be accessed until Mordin is recruited, tying him explicitly to the room and the ability to make use of upgrades.
Can you imagine if the third game not only kept the tech room, the tech lab, but you could recruit more scientists? Right now, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but there are more scientist characters that you get to know, you get to like, and then they go off and disappear into Mass Effect, and you never see or hear from them again, except maybe through emails. Can you imagine how cool that would have been?
This really helps move past the fact he's locked in this room, because rather than having to trek into the elevator and then into a random room to have a conversation, he's right there in your path. Mordin also has an insane amount of conversations, which acknowledge the collectors and the main plot of the game far more than all other squad mates combined. Every single one of these are very entertaining and masterfully written. with the final one being a hilarious dialogue about who Shepard has romanced. This means Mordin actually acknowledges other. Every single one of these are very entertaining and masterfully written, with the final.
Please don't do that. Come on, I need time to read. Okay, technically it's not the final one, but usually you lock in your romance completely after seeing his conversation, so it's just usually the last one you get to see it early if you lock in a romance and trigger conversation with him twice in one visit before cheering on the normal conversations. With an I there. Oh, swapped with a T. Alright, so simple typo then. Alright. Yeah.
Final one being a hilarious dialogue about who Shepard has romanced. This means Mordin actually acknowledges other characters in a way most squad mates don't. We never hear what Tally, Jack, or Grunt really think of each other, despite being grouped up. But
I'm ashamed to admit it, but as much as I like to say that the second game was my favorite because of the characters and the dialogue, I can't help but agree. Mass Effect 3 tried to fix that by having people move around the ship over the course of missions, between missions, but forgive my coughing. I had that throat problem, you probably remember. But yeah, Mass Effect 3 tried but failed to fix that problem by having squad mates talk to each other and move around the ship. But the reason why I say it's a failure is because the squad was my least favorite of the trilogy, and it was only back to 6 people at most, and half of them aren't even accessible until the last half of the game. And that's a disgrace. I don't like that at all. The second game was the best time to do that. And speaking of the tech lab, there's also the med bay. I wish in the third game we had both Chloe Michelle and Dr. Chakwas, instead of just having to pick one or the other. And yeah, there's Mass Effect 2 and 1 kind of suck in that they lack. Well, actually, no, only the second one, because the first one has the elevator conversations. So, yeah, I wish the elevator conversations were back. And Mass Effect Andromeda, to its credit, brings those back because they talk while you drive around the planet side in the vehicle.
Mordin gets a conversation for every romance option, meaning you get to see him acknowledge the character you are most attached to. Then, once you have finally exhausted all of his conversations, he doesn't default to a single line telling you he doesn't want to talk. He has a wide range of ways to tell you he's busy, and they're pretty much all hilarious. It's clear that they gave so much dialogue.
And that one right there is the most infamous. The scale itch, and everyone likes to pin the blame on poor Kelly Chambers, giving her a bad reputation. How dare you people do that? I loved Kelly Chambers, and that's another one of Mass Effect 3's countless sins. I'm so happy that a mod maker went through the trouble of bringing Kelly back and giving her a fleshed out story. I love it.
To him because they knew that players would spend a ton of time in the tech lab and usually speak with him whenever they went in there to work on their upgrades. And alongside his huge amount of conversations and range of funny one-liners, he also gets further attention by meeting with Shepard to discuss the collectors. Also, fun fact, Mordin is one of the few aliens believed to actually be speaking in English rather than further attention by meeting with Shepard to discuss.
Sorry about rewinding it, but I just love the way his face turns into a smile. I mean, that's one of the few things I love about the Solarians. Their faces, they're funny and cute in a way.
Yes, the collectors. Also,
I love it for some reason. I don't know why.
Fun fact, Mordin is one of the few aliens believed to actually be speaking in English rather than through a translator. It helps explain the rhyming of his personalized Gilbert and Sullivan and his method of speaking. All of this works together to create a character that genuinely feels like your partner in action. He's the squad mate you will see the most, with the most to say, and who genuinely acknowledges what's going on in the main plot and Shepard's personal life. And this strong presence is utilized well for Part 2, Mordin's Inner Conflict. When speaking with Mordin, you learn that he worked to bolster the Krogan sterility plague, the genophage. In Mass Effect 1, the genophage was portrayed vaguely, with the general point being that it was bad. You really only ever heard about its history from Rex in that game, and you destroy a facility with its cure because you need it out of the villain Saren's hands.
Oh, wait a minute.
The general point.
Thousands die in stillbirth. Most never get that far. Alright, because I was under the impression that, you know how a Krogan female can pop out 1,000 eggs in a year? Well, I was under the impression that, she was unable to conceive, but apparently they give birth to dead babies. Yeah, that's the problem with Mordin. Mordin thinks that he has not killed anybody with medicine, quote unquote, not with medicine. Well, stillbirths count as dead babies. So, Mordin, yeah, you do kind of suck, but I'm glad you have that emotional outburst where you redeem yourself.
Being that it was bad. You really only ever heard about its history from Rex in that game, and you destroy a facility with its cure because you need it out of the villain Saren's hands. At no point is it ever said that the genophage should never be cured at all, just that Saren breeding a Krogan army needs to be stopped, and the only option you have is out of the villain Saren's hands.
Sorry about that.
At no point is it
I have to make a point. People who attack Elnora for pointing a gun at you, they kind of forget the fact that Rex also points a gun at you. If pointing a gun at you is enough to, well, not show mercy and end someone's life, especially that of a young Asari who's basically a girl who's 18 or 19 by our standards, well, then why not shoot this big boy? Don't get me wrong, I love Rex. Rex is the big, lovable uncle I never had.
Ever said that the genophage should never be cured at all, just that Saren breeding a Krogan army needs to be stopped, and the only option you have is blowing the entire place to hell. So when this really likable character tells you that he worked on a sterility plague, it's a shock. And of course you're given the opportunity to either agree with what Mordin did or argue with him that it was wrong. It's arguing with him that really tells a lot about his character. There is nothing you can say in this conversation that even makes him flinch at what he did. Every single thing Shepard can think to bring up, Mordin has already thought about.
And as President Trump has pointed out, that's, I love Garrus, but as Trump pointed out, Garrus is a yes man. I don't like yes men. I like being able to converse with a character who, like Mordin. That's one thing I like about Mordin. Like he's pointing out, you can argue with him.
When a character does something extreme, but is then shocked by the most basic questions, it makes it seem like they put zero thought into what they did. The fact that Mordin already considered everything you can mention makes it clear that this was something he did his research on. He was certain in his actions and shows zero signs of any hesitation. It's in his loyalty mission that we get the first look at Mordin being truly shaken and unsure. The mission starts with Mordin asking you to help rescue his former student who was captured, one who helped him work on the genophage. Once you get to where he's being held, you learn that he's working on a cure for the genophage through horrific experiments that clearly upset Mordin. Unlike the cure encounter in Mass Effect 1, there's actually time to think about it here. It's a single facility giving you very little trouble, as opposed to a massive compound armed with a Reaper. So Shepard and Mordin argue about the ethics of the genophage. At first, Mordin maintains his stoicism, but this is where the cracks begin to show. He reveals that after the project, he did understand the ethically questionable nature of what he did, whereas before this, he acted as if it was black and white with a simple, obvious answer. But he still insists that what he did was right. However, as opposed to the dismissive nature of his previous conversations, he is now defensive and combative. Mordin goes into complete conflict when you encounter the dead Krogan woman in the next room. He realizes that she was a volunteer, that she'd let them conduct horrible experiments on her, and he struggles. It was all simulations, all a numbers game to him, comparing theories and doing whichever gave the best numbers. It was fun. And now he's looking at an innocent dead woman who let herself get butchered in the hopes of undoing what he did. He holds his position on the genophage, but he is so clearly unsure. Then you finally get to Mordin's student, Malin, and you learn that the cure work and horrible experiments were all his choice. Up until now, Mordin assumed he was forced to do this. Mordin is challenged by somebody who was part of that same genophage project, somebody he cared about. Mordin can't even take solace in the calculations by the team, because somebody else who was on that team is now willing to do everything to undo their work.
I must partly correct myself of what I said earlier. Not all Solarians look cute. Some look outright, ugly like this guy, and I probably wouldn't hesitate to shoot him myself if he were a bad guy, but in this case he's a good guy, and so I wouldn't do that. But yeah, Mass Effect Andromeda not only ruined all of the women and the Asari, but they also ruined the Solarians as well. Basically, everybody looks ugly as hell in one way or another. And that snob who is in charge of the Andromeda Initiative, oh man, I wish I was allowed to do anything. But Mass Effect Andromeda robbed us of our choices, but I digress.
Mordin gets a look at the actual, no longer theoretical, impact of his work, followed by a confrontation, learning that he was wrong about why they came here, and that he was wrong about what he thought of Malin. He is so emotionally overwhelmed that he guns down his former student unless you stop him. And he has absolutely no clue what to do with the cure progress, with Malin's data. He's clearly drained, and the most unsure he's felt about any of this in a long time. So, he lets Shepard decide what to do. Throughout his loyalty mission, Mordin slowly goes from dismissive of any challenges to his work, to defensive, to doubting, to completely and totally unsure of his actions. Then you get back to the Normandy, and he's fine. He puts back on the dismissive stoic face, and that's how he is for the rest of the series. Kind of.
It suddenly occurred to me, are there any downsides to letting him kill his student? Because I've always let him live, and I thought it was necessary for the future. But then I realized it's about saving the data. It's not about saving the student, it's about saving the data. That makes all the difference for whether or not Eve survives. So, is there any downside to letting the student live other than our bad conscience? Please let me know.
I'll come back to this as I go over Part 3, Mordin's Outcomes. The stories of the squad mates in Mass Effect have a varying amount of outcomes. Some, like Liara and EDI, have a very small amount of variation and generally follow the same path regardless of what you do. Others, like Rex, Ashley, and Kaidan, have a wide variety of fates. Mordin has 4 distinct outcomes. The first outcome is that Mordin can face an untimely demise in the Collector base. I'm not going to dive into this because it's not fundamentally different than any other character dying in this mission, and thus it isn't super relevant to what makes Mordin stand out. He's still well executed, but it isn't unique.
It's also one of the stupidest parts of Mass Effect 2 because there is no reason why if the other squad mate is also a biotic, there's no reason why they can't redeploy the bubble themselves, even for at least a short time. I mean, they're very near their exit, so yeah.
There are a few neat minor details, but they would take too long to explore, so I'll post them down in the comments. It's his outcomes in Mass Effect 3 that really put Mordin above and beyond.
Speaking of what I said much earlier about the why take one or the other when you should be able to have both, I never once let Mordin die, but apparently the substitute that comes in his stead is a very, very funny guy, and it's an absolute shame that we're not allowed to bring him along with Mordin just so that we can, have all those funny moments without having to sacrifice Mordin for them. So sorry about that untimely interruption. I'll compensate. Yeah, there we go. Oh, come on, you.
Really put Mordin above and beyond. In Mass Effect 3, Mordin is tasked with the goal of curing the genophage. Really put Mordin executed, but it isn't unique. There are a few neat minor details, but they would take too long to explore, so I'll post them down in the comments. It's his outcomes in Mass Effect 3 that really put Mordin above and beyond. In Mass Effect 3, Mordin is tasked with the goal of curing the genophage, the same disease that he strengthened when he was younger and that he defended in Mass Effect 2. However, he insists that he stands by what he did, and that does not conflict with what he's doing now. As I said, once he gets back from his loyalty mission, he has reached closure and continues with his mindset. He continues to insist that the genophage was right, and now the right thing to do is cure it. He says that what he did was the right decision then, and he's only done a 180 here because the circumstances are different, not his beliefs. This arc culminates in the Shroud, where Mordin is required to go up to the top to fix sabotage. Shepard was promised Solarian aid if he let the sabotage remain and deceived the Krogan. If you inform the Krogan of the sabotage...
This definitely makes me worried about the Mass Effect 4. And yes, I'm calling it 4, not 5, because I don't recognize Andromeda, but as anything but a trashy spin-off. Doesn't deserve a number. But, I really, really do hope that the genophage cure is canon because, well, basically, I want Mass Effect 4 to ignore the players who sabotaged the cure and got Rex killed. I know that'll be hurtful, but I deem it necessary because of the. Well, Mass Effect 3 was a disaster because they were forced to retcon many of our choices because there was not enough room to accommodate all of those choices. And I fear that'll be the same way here. So I want these people, this Dalatress and her people, to really pay the price for not helping us during the Reaper War. They deserve to get hit hard.
Shepard was promised Salarian aid if he let the sabotage remain and deceived the Krogan. If you inform the Krogan of the sabotage, the Shroud scene will always play out in a specific heartbreaking way. Mordin goes to the top of the Shroud Tower, makes sure the cure disperses, and dies due to the building collapsing. That is the end of Mordin's life, dying to end the disease that he strengthened. This scene changes depending on your interactions with Mordin in Mass Effect 2. By default, he gives himself an inspirational speech in his last moments. However, if you got to know him and heard him sing, you get this.
Yeah, I only remember the speech. I don't remember him repeating this song, and that's how I know for a fact that I never heard him sing, and that breaks my heart. It makes me realize I neglected him. I guess it's because all those years ago when I was playing, I was too emotionally distraught with what kind of a guy he was, defending mass murder because to him, an unborn baby isn't a person. So, yeah.
Temperature now within acceptable range. Dispersal commencing.
Makes it all the more heartbreaking for sure. The singing.
If you don't let the Krogan know of the cure, you can still warn Mordin, and the scene then plays out this way. But now you also have the option to try and delay Mordin to prevent him from fixing the sabotage. Doing this is the only way to see the truth behind Mordin's arc. When you try to delay him, an argument breaks out and he makes a confession.
Not concerned for my safety. Concerned I might discover something. Sabotage? But whose? Why, Shepard? That desperate for Salarian aid? Or that afraid of Krogan?
Every time we've talked about this before, you've defended the genophage. Hell, I had to talk you into saving Malin's data. How can you change your mind now?
I made a mistake! I made a mistake. Focused on big picture. Big picture made of little pictures. Too many variables. Can't hide behind statistics. Can't ignore new data. My responsibility. Need to go. Running out of time.
I have to admit, I never tried to delay him the first time because I was always afraid that I would accidentally, convince him to sabotage the cure, and I didn't want to do that. And so I never got this outburst from him, and I was shocked when I found out it existed. I need to pucker up the courage to play Mass Effect again and risk all that heartbreak and depression I suffered from the first time and the second time. So, yeah, on we go.
He thinks the genophage was a mistake. He thinks strengthening it was a mistake. And he feels that doing this is the only way he can atone. Mordin always reaches this conclusion, but he lies to you and himself, saying that it's merely now the right time for the cure. It is only by pressuring him in this moment that he finally accepts how he actually feels. This is a great way to show a major flaw of Mordin in a very important scene. He's very defensive and argumentative. He hides his true feelings when you're saying he did something wrong, and he only admits that he believes he was wrong when you force him to by agreeing with his actions.
Oh, and one more thing, not necessarily about Mordin. Well, he asks the question, are we that desperate for Salarian aid, or are we too afraid of the Krogan? Well, as I said a million times before, I hate Mass Effect 3 for the auto-dialogue and my inability to answer questions at certain times. And that one right there was a question that I wanted to answer. I love the Krogan people, but I'm also really desperate for aid from all sources, including the Solarians. The Reapers are trying to kill us all, and we need all the help we can get. So,
And then, once he admits that, you're given a choice. You either let him go up the Shroud Tower and cure the genophage, or you stop him. He's absolutely committed, so there's only one option. If you want to stop Mordin from curing the genophage, you have to kill him. You have to pull the trigger and gun down this man who has always had your back. And it's even more brutal than it seems at a glance. Mass Effect sometimes equips you with a type of gun you weren't carrying, or changes the one you were so it can fit the cutscene better, usually changing it to the default Avenger AR or Predator pistol.
I really, really do hate how that works in this game. I conveniently am given the weakest pistol there is. In fact, all three of my squad mates, as you can see, have the weakest pistol there is, just for the sake of plot convenience. And then I'm given the strongest pistol there is, again, for plot convenience. Ugh, it pisses me off. But by the way, good news, there is now a mod that allows Mordin to survive that explosion. He actually walks out of the building, out of the smoldered building, alive but wounded in the same exact fashion as Grunt, and he now becomes a person who stays on the ship in the med bay, if I remember correctly, doing experiments and stuff. It's pretty cool.
This cutscene is unique in that it will put a Carnifex in your hand. The Carnifex was introduced in Mass Effect 2 when it was gifted to Shepard.
And that part right there always bothers me. Throwing away the pistol, losing your gun, and somehow nobody taking that into account. Like how you lose your assault rifle that's automatically given to you, your Avenger, in the Thessian Temple. I hate that as well. Oh, come on, you.
Unique in that it will put a Carnifex in your hand. The Carnifex was introduced in Mass Effect 2 when it was gifted to Shepard by Mordin. You kill him with the gun he gave you when you met him. Then you watch this fucking harrowing scene.
Warning, temperature malfunction detected.
I completely forgot about that.
Warning, temperature malfunction
But he gave you the
detected.
pistol.
Not yet. Not yet.
Oh, wow. My heart is hard to make me weep, but
No. Not ready. Warning, temperature malfunction detected.
You stop Mordin in the worst way possible. This is honestly one of the most heinous and cruel choices in the entire series, and frankly, any video game. Now, earlier I said that Mordin has 4 distinct outcomes, but I've only listed 3 so far. The 4th outcome is one that I believe a majority of people have never seen. If Rex dies, his asshole brother Reeve takes over Clan Urdnot. If you don't save Malin's data in Mordin's loyalty mission, Eve ends up dying. If you do get to the point where Mordin is about to head up the tower to fix the sabotage while Eve is dead, Reeve is in charge, and you did not tell the Krogan about the sabotage, you are able to keep Mordin alive. In this circumstance only, after you try to delay Mordin and he says that he made a mistake, a Paragon and Renegade check will appear. As I said, I believe that most people have never seen this scene, so I'm going to play it in its entirety.
Can't stop now. Gone too far. Eve dead. Krogan deserve a cure.
I agree, Mordin, but not now.
If not now, when?
Someday. But when we...
If not now.
Never seen this scene, so I'm going to play it in its entirety.
Can't stop now. Gone too far.
let's see. Now isn't the time. Why? I'll still be okay. I never got those options, so forgive me for pausing.
Eve dead. Krogan deserve a cure.
I agree, Mordin, but not now.
If not now, when?
Someday. But when we stop the Reapers, this whole galaxy will need time to recover. Reeve won't give us that time. He'll attack while the rest of us are weak.
Eve would have stopped him.
Eve isn't here.
I wonder what she would do to stop him.
No. Suggest we let Krogan believe dispersal was a success. Ensure alliance. We'll need to disappear to keep story accurate. Reeve will think I died at Tower, curing genophage.
Doing what had to be done.
We'll also inform the Dalagras of the deception.
Good. Here are the coordinates for the Crucible project. We can use your help building it.
Thank you, Shepard. Too eager to atone. Would have compounded error. Glad you were here.
Someone else might have gotten it wrong.
Mordin thanks you, because he was determined to cure the genophage and right his wrong. However, with Reeve in charge and Eve dead, that's a horrible idea. Yet he was still willing to die to see it done. For him to decide not to cure the genophage, he needs to admit the true reason he wants it cured.
So it's not the dispersal that causes the explosion, it's the elevator moving up. Very weird.
He can only let the genophage continue when he acknowledges his guilt over strengthening it. Before he can rethink his stance, he has to face his bottled-up emotions. Mordin, a man who is so incredibly driven by logic, is making an irrational emotional choice that he needs to be talked out of. Even if you don't ever end up in the circumstances where this presents itself as an option, this path existing really shows a lot about Mordin. All of these outcomes, these are what make Mordin such an amazing character. Mordin will always go through this arc of feeling secure in his prior actions, then feeling doubt over himself, then wanting to cure the genophage to assuage his guilt. However, his story is also massively influenced by Shepard. Whether or not he ever gets the chance to set things right, whether he realizes the true reason he wants to cure it, whether he decides it's better left in place, and whether he's able to act on his decision. The numerous options provided to the player drastically change the context of Mordin's arc, even with minimal changes to its direction. If Shepard agrees with the genophage and wants to keep it in place, Mordin's arc is one of self-discovery and listening to his inner conscience over those around him telling him what should be done. If Shepard agreed with the genophage, but also decides not to sabotage the cure, then Mordin faces very little conflict. He doesn't introspect over his actions, and he goes to his death, falsely assuring himself that what he did was the right thing, and all that changed was the time and circumstances. Even if he doesn't survive into Mass Effect 3, he still has an interesting story. The scientist who did something horrible and refused to admit any fault, but he still cleared his name by dying to help save humanity. Mordin is brilliant because he goes through a masterfully written arc that still manages to be heavily influenced by the player's choices and actions. It manages to avoid the clunky lack of satisfaction an arc with too much choice can lead to, and a lack of investment.
To be fair, the arcs are flawed because Mass Effect 3, BioWare made the idiotic decision to replace almost all of the best writers for the third game. Lots of critical staff thrown away, writers and devs alike, which is why Ashley not only has a serious lacking in dialogue, but a new look. Her original designer insisted that the woman he created was a strong and professional soldier who just so happened to also be an attractive woman, and that this new creation for the third game was quote-unquote a sex doll with a gun. And of course, her new writer clearly didn't know what to do with her, and that's why he has her recycle some of her older dialogue and, not say much afterwards.
Caused by an arc you have very little influence over. He is a distinct and memorable character with countless great moments and hilarious lines. And most of all, he is the very model of a scientist Solarian.
That is one of the most beautiful spoofs I've ever listened to. And I love making spoofs. Taking dialogue and rewording it slightly and, so anyway, give all your love to PikmonWolf for making this brilliant video, and hit the like button on his side as well. Hit the like button on him and for me, and click the subscribe button for both, and take care, y'all.